Hello. In the last video, we learned, well, one, we learned that when you call a return statement, when you execute a return statement, that Java will exit the method immediately with the value of that Boolean expression. So no code will run after that return statement, and if we try to write code after a return statement, we get an error message that says unreachable statement, and that will remind us that, oops, we tried to run code after a return statement and we know we can't do that. We also learned that when we define a method, we can define methods that have side effects, like moving the robot around, and methods that don't, that simply return an answer, like this front is blocked, which returns a true or false. And although we could define a method that returns an answer and has a side effect, we would prefer not to, at least for a little while until we're more savvy in our programming abilities. So therefore, when we defined a method to determine if the square to the left is dark, we wanted to make sure we had no side effect since we're returning an answer here. And, before I continue with that, I remembered something that I've seen a lot of students do, and I want to make sure you don't make the same mistake. And that's, sometimes I'll see a student start to define a method called test or check if wall, or something like that. Check if left is dark. And that turns out, the moment you find yourself writing a method called check something or test something, that actually means you're about to do something that isn't going to work for you. If we say, let's say, check if left is dark, well, what does this method do? Does it simply check? If it checks something, does it get an answer? It doesn't return it because my method is void. So if I meant to return an answer, then I should have made it Boolean. And then I should probably rephrase it to sound like some sort of true or false condition, like whether the left is dark. So, in fact, good method names is, I think, critical here. So, just beware. The moment you start defining a void method called check something, it probably means that you should have defined a Boolean method that sounds like a legitimate test condition, like whether or not the left is dark. Okay, let's go back to the left is dark we actually did implement. It says, slide to the left. If the robot's on dark, we return true, and otherwise we return false. Let's get that all on the screen. But it also says, after testing if the robot's on dark, we're going to slide back to the right to eliminate the side effect of having slid to the left. And likewise, we're going to slide back to the right if the robot is not on dark. But it's critical that we slide to the right here and here, because if we slide after the return, my code won't compile because nothing runs after a return statement. And if I slide back to the right before the if, I'll be testing the wrong cell to see if that cell is dark. So I really do need to slide to the right after the test, before the return, and that means in both branches of the if. Let's write the opposite one. I think that will pay off. Let's write right is dark. And there's a few ways you could write right is dark. We could simply reverse this and say, let's see, right is dark. We could say slide to the right. If you're on dark, slide back to the left and return true, and otherwise slide back to the left and return false. But maybe a fun thing to do would be to use the method we just wrote. So let's try that. The method we just wrote is left is dark. So we can say if, and it's in my file called swap. I'm in a file called swap right now. I'll prove that to you again. Swap. Uh-oh, there's my cursor. Okay. If swap left is dark. How can we use testing the left to see if the right is dark? This is maybe I'm just indulging myself in being silly here. Oh, sorry, I already loaded that. I just didn't show it. So, how do I figure out if the right is dark if all I can do is test if the left is dark? I turn around. And when I turn around and test if the left is dark, I'll really be testing if the right is dark. Maybe this is just silly, but I thought this would give us a little bit more practice. So we'll turn around, which means I'm going to need a turnaround method, and I'll define it in this file. So turn around, test if the left is dark. If the left is dark, I should return true, because that means the right is dark. Otherwise, if the left is dark after I've turned around, that means, or if the left is not dark after turning around, that means the right was not dark originally, so I'll return false. Let's hit compile. Oops, I need to write turn around. I knew that was coming. Public static, this is void because turnaround does not return a method, does not return a value. All it does is turn to the left, which is something I can ask the robot file to perform for me. Turn to the left twice. Compile. Okay, let's try that out. And I think you probably already see what's going to go wrong, but I thought we'd see this problem one more time. It was called right is dark. So here we'd expect it to return true. Does it? It does, but my robot is now facing the wrong direction, and that's because I didn't take into account that I turned around at the beginning. Left is dark does not have any side effects, therefore my robot is still facing turned around from relative to the original direction, and if I want no side effects in right is dark, that means I need to turn back around, and it must be after I test but before I return, for the same reasons as the previous method. Okay, hit compile, and right is dark should be true and should remain in its original spot afterward. Good, we got that working. Now why did I write these two things? Well, let's go back to the original problem like 2 hours ago or something. Here we go. Swap the colors in this particular row. And I wanted to write, if the left and right are different colors, then swap them. So maybe we need a test that says left and right are different. So let's write that. That sounds like a Boolean method. Public static Boolean. I'm going to return a true or false. Left and right are different. How about that? It's a big, wordy method name, but there's no doubt about what that means. Left and right are different. How do we figure out if the left and right are different? Well, I guess we want to test each part. So if, I'm going to want to see more of my method on the screen. Here we go. If the left is dark, then, well, now I want to test if the right is dark. If the left is dark, then if the right is dark, let's see. If the right is dark, then what? Well, that means both the left and the right were dark, so they're not different. So I'll return false. I'm only interested in returning true when they're different. Okay, likewise, let's see. If I get here, that means the left was dark, but the right wasn't. So they are different. So I will return true. And I'm probably going to have something very similar, but not quite identical, in my else. So in the else, I already know left is not dark. Right? In fact, maybe we'll write left is light, because maybe that's easier to think about. The left is light, so I check the right. If the right is dark and the left is light, then the answer is true. They're different. And otherwise, they're not. They're both light, so they're not different. I return false. Okay, let's see if we can make this a little prettier. What I have now will work, but let's make it pretty. A lot of programming is about elegance. I'm trying to make my program readable for myself, and this is hard to read. Look at this big mess here. So, swap right is dark. That's a Boolean expression. So when I execute this if statement, Java's going to evaluate this Boolean expression and get a true or false value. If Java gets true, this if says to return true. And if Java gets false, then the if says it's going to return false, which really means this if always returns the value of this expression. So we could simply write, and we've seen this before, but I'm going to show it in as many videos as I can because I think it's such an important idea. We could simply write this: return that the right is dark. Right? The left is light, so return that the right is dark, and that would establish that they're different. Okay, likewise, we could be clever about this one. This says, here's a Boolean expression. If it's true, we return false. If it's false, we return true. In other words, we return the opposite of right is dark. So we could simplify this and say just return not right is dark, like that. Now it fits on one screen. That's a sign that we've done something nice. So it says, if the left is dark, return the opposite of the right being dark, and otherwise, return that the right is dark. That's kind of interesting. I want to see some other ways we could write this method, though. And that's going to involve introducing how to write ands and ors in Java, and I think we'll take a look at that in the very next video, so I'll see you there.